Hello! In 2 weeks' time, I start a new job that requires me to have a home office. I didn't have a home office not very long ago, and I still don't have one now. But if you want to see how I've built this so far, stay tuned and say hello to Doggy. So first step on this project is to create a very simple looking frame with some shelves on to go on the opposite side to the chest of drawers. It's going to be a big heavy ash countertop on top of it, and then on top of that there's going to be all the little enclosures for different stuff that I haven't decided. I just wanted to build a media wall because they look cool. Fish tank, I want a fish tank. So I'm going to use this remotely straight timber to create a kind of framework. It's got to have a very low shelf to sit my computer tower on, and then I'd like to have a little shelf above it to put random bits on, like my microphone, my headphones. The only issue is, because it's going to have a lot of weight on top of it, it's got to be strong, it's got to be precise, it's got to be accurate. These are all things that I struggle with. What could go wrong? He says.
And if you've been with me from the start, you'll know I am not lying. Now, this channel is about the journey of woodworking, so I am trying to advance my skills. So I wasn't too scared of the pressures of being accurate and creating something sturdy. So my first step was very carefully marking out the measurements for these legs. I had to be careful because part of this timber was not very straight at all. So I used the straightest sections and tried to get these cuts millimetre perfect because I can't afford any wobble on this stand at all.
So I've got all of my uprights, my legs if you like, cut. They're all the same size, measured twice, cut once, it's a first. These need to have, if this is the bottom, it's got to have a shelf about there that my computer tower will sit on, and then I want a shelf right near the top, just a little cubby hole to put random bits in, USB cables, microphone, things like that, things I use for editing. So I'm going to use an old carpenter's trick of not actually measuring each single one. All I've done is I've clamped a piece of wood there, take measurements off the first one, square across, keeps everything simple. Now, no, it's not the precise and accurate thing that I spoke about, but it's quick and I'm hot. So, on we go.
So after clamping a square piece of timber to my workbench, I just butted all the legs up to it. I said butted. And then I used my square and just drew those straight lines. Now these rebates are going to house the plywood shelves. I could have used brackets, I could have used dowels, but this I think is going to give me the most strength. Next up I took the lengths over to the miter saw. Now the way I use the trenching feature on the miter saw you might already know, but I put a scrap piece of sacrificial wood at the back. I then put a little notch in it. Now that gives you the perfect centre line in case your laser's broken like mine is. Then you can just line up your pencil marks to that little notch you've put in and use the trenching feature to dig out and create that rebate. This is great if you haven't got a sliding table saw fixture or you haven't got a dado stack. I've found this works pretty well. You've got to do a bit of chiselling afterwards to clean everything up, but it's fairly accurate.
So I've got all of my legs cut. Before I say anything more, if you hear a weird noise in the background, I can only apologise. My neighbours decided to rescue a chicken with a broken voice, and it just goes "Bah, bah, bah," all the time. And it lives just on the other side of my garage. I've got my legs cut. I've checked everything with a piece of ply and it all fits in snugly. I'm not worried about any kind of movement left to right. I don't need it to be structurally strong that way because it's going to be against the wall holding up a countertop, if you like. It's a kitchen countertop I'm using. I am worried though about forwards and backwards. The reason being is I've noticed something with my current computer desk. When I want to wheel my chair in, I don't use my feet, I grab the desk and wheel in. So I want to make it solid. So what I thought about was, in between each one of these, having a batten like that. And if I route a groove, a rebate into there, and then use plenty of glue, slot this in, surely that's a bomb-proof shelf. I think.
So with a plan formed and somewhat in my head, I decided just to crack on. My first job was to cut out the shelves. I'm using 18mm ply for this. With the amount of weight that's going to be sitting on top of this whole structure, I didn't want to skimp on the ply. So the shelves are going to be as thick as I could make them, which is 18mm. I then moved on to cutting down the battens to the right length. I'm trying my best to find some squareness and straightness in that timber from B&Q, but it is difficult. Once each batten was cut to length, I then took it over to the table router and then used that to create the rebate. I can't use the trenching feature because obviously I'm working lengthways through the wood. Now I don't have the luxury of owning an 18mm router bit either, so what I did was found the centre line and used a 10mm router bit. You've then got to play around with the fence a little bit, use some test pieces, and you can basically run it through once and then flip it round and run it through again, and you're left with a nice 18mm rebate down the centre of that piece of wood. Again, this doesn't have to be too perfect, but I try my best to get it that way.
Right, so I have just done one of these. I just want to make sure I've got all the right measurements first before I crack on with the rest. Now, cutting it was really easy. These are 38mm by 38mm, which means 18mm ply, take that off, and I just needed to knock the router fence back 10mm. Easy to do. Even I managed it, maybe, potentially. Now, a couple of these I've got to chisel out, didn't quite get the trenching accurate. They're fine on one side, but I just didn't bring the blade back enough. However, I'm warning you that these aren't supposed to go all the way to the end because I'm going to trim them up with a almost face frame if you like. But in theory, it should all slot together with enough room for my face frame to go on. It's like real joinery. I'm kind of challenging myself on this one to not use any screws. I've got all kinds of potential to use completely hidden pocket holes, but I'd quite like the idea of just using traditional joinery with modern day tools. And the idea with doing all of these rebates is it provides more surface area for the glue to adhere to, the wood can interlock. Already, that's barely got any wobble in it at all, and it's not glued and there's only one piece. As time consuming as this is, I do quite enjoy it quite a lot when it works. Couple more cuts to do before I can start gluing up. You'll notice that the ply is actually recessed here. Now that's for a good reason. I didn't want to do the same bracing as I've done on the side. I want a lip on the side, but I don't want a lip on the front. I want to be able to slide things in and out easily. The other reason is I didn't want this plywood to come all the way to the end. Now, yes, I'm going to paint all this, but the edge of ply doesn't paint very well. And I didn't want to edge band it just to paint it, because the edge banding, you're then working in tiny fractions. So I've got some straight pine. I'm going to cut it to the length from there to there, and then probably just use a handsaw to cut out the groove, see how neat I can get it.
Which is exactly what I did, and this might be the most overcomplicated way of putting this on the front. I could maybe have stopped the rebate a little bit shy instead of running it all the way through, but I'm not really planning anything here. I know what I want it to look like, I just didn't really plan out how I wanted to get here. And to be honest, that's my favourite type of woodworking, where you've got the end product in your mind and you go into the garage and just hope that that end product is the end product. And in this case, it actually worked out pretty well. And by pretty well, I mean the end product. As with everything I try, there are a few bumps in the road along the way, and you're about to see one of those little mistakes. However, it's cheap wood and it was an easy fix. They're going to need redoing. I cut these tenons at 10mm, and I forgot. I changed my mind and did an 8mm rebate. Although how much play do we... No, I'll do it again. I've got a feeling that this glue up is going to be a sad one. I don't know why I think that. Just a hunch. Actually wasn't too bad. I mean, it's probably the first glue up where I've actually prepared a wet rag, got my glue bottle ready, found an old paintbrush, cleared my work surface. It's funny that those things make a difference, but it's actually gone together pretty well. Just need to wipe off some of the excess glue, leave it for a few hours, and then I'm going to take the clamps off, mainly because I need the clamps for another project. I also need those dogs to shut up. So it's out of clamps and it's mostly successful. This at the top is perfect. These line up brilliantly. At the bottom here, even though I crammed some glue in, there's still a bit of a gap. However, it is absolutely solid. Now I need to get this filled, sanded, painted, because the worktop just arrived about half an hour ago. And that's an issue, because it's 3 meters long and you currently have to climb over it to get to the bathroom. The wife's not happy. So pressure's on to get this painted, sorted, so that tomorrow I can install the worktop. Everybody loves painting. That's a lie. Who likes painting? Artists, I suppose. But as you can see in the background, there's a chest of drawers there that you might have seen in the previous video. Trouble is, I've not even finished building them yet. That's breaking the wall down of YouTube. So the idea is that they will match this, and that's the same colour as the back wall over there. And then once it's all done, I've got a nice ash countertop that I did not make, I bought, that I'm going to mount on top. And then comes phase 2. All the shelving with the integrated lights and the telly and the... Anyway, I'm going to throw some beats on and get to it. Now the next day I came and checked these measurements again. Now I've taken these measurements about 57,000 times, but I needed to make sure. This is an expensive piece of wood that's going on top and I cannot afford to mess it up. I've taken my measurements from both the face and the back against the wall, and I'm glad I did, because there's actually a 12mm discrepancy. Right against that back wall that's painted green, the walls cave in, and I can't really blame anybody for that, because I put up the plasterboard. I'm using the spirit level to check whether the wall at the back is bowed. It's actually not. The wall at the back is perfectly straight. The 2 side walls are the ones that go out, so I'm not going to need to profile the back of the countertop, and most of it's going to be hidden anyway, but the sides definitely need profiling. Knowing that the back wall is perfectly straight, I've got a square piece of MDF. I butt that up against the back wall, and then I'm using a pencil and a washer to run along the side wall. What this does is it gives me a line where I know how much that wall comes in or goes out. I'm then going to use a jigsaw and finally sand it to give me a template. Better to waste a piece of MDF than to screw up your nice ash worktop. The great thing about MDF is that it's practically paper, so I use the jigsaw to come really close to that pencil line and then just use the orbital sander to get right up to the pencil line. It gives me as accurate a template as I could possibly have. After that, I then use the track saw to cut it roughly to length. It's a couple of mil extra because I'm going to put that template on and then try and take off the excess. This worktop is very thick, so after marking out where my template lies on it, I then use the track saw, and it's a bit fiddly, but it was the only way I could get through this thickness of material. The jigsaw just wasn't going to cut it. Again, going close to the pencil line, and then I used a belt sander, which was a bit time consuming, but brought it right to that template line. And I cannot tell you how heavy this thing was. I had to recruit the family who very kindly came over and helped me lug it through the house over all of the trip hazards, because it's currently a building site, into my new office, and then we had to try and wrestle it into place. I mean, the paintwork did look nice and fresh before we did this, and it might need a little retouch afterwards. But the moment of truth.
Yeah, okay. That's not bad at all, mate. You did a good job of that.
Look at that!
First time.
Fits! Amazing. Not that I ever doubted your skills.
Look at that.
That would have been a shot if it was just gone like that.
The sad part about it all was once it was in, it then had to come back out. Once the family had helped me dump it on the floor and then departed, I then used a Forstner bit to drill some holes straight through this beautiful piece of wood. Now, I need to thread cables through for monitors and for lighting, and this was a big task. It took a considerable amount of time using my DeWalt drill until I remembered, oh, I've got my favourite tool in the world in the garage. This did involve jigging the table up a little bit and putting it on higher stilts, but the big lad came in. So I've got two sets of these holes, and each set has two holes drilled in it, if that makes any sense. I wanted something wide enough that you could get a plug and several wires through. But the trouble is, then it creates a kind of figure eight shape. So what I did was I used a straight edge and a Stanley knife to kind of join those edges of the 8 up, and then I used the chisel to come back through and clean it up. This was quite easy. I didn't realise how nice it is to chisel hard wood. It ended up pretty clean. I was very happy. After sanding, it was time to stain, or dye at least. Now, I'm going to warn you, this part is going to divide opinion big lots. That piece of ash that you're looking at is absolutely stunning. It cost me £250 off the internet. I'll put a link in the description below. I think it's a bargain. It is very good quality, very heavy, very real. And I decided to dye it to keep with the rest of the house. Now, I know that's going to make a lot of you sad, but just trust me. You will love it. Once that dye is dry, it looks really dull, but just look at the difference of coming over with some wax makes. It gives that wood a slightly dampened effect and really brings out the grain. Now, I did actually do the underside using Osmo, but I really didn't like the finish. Using the dye, which is a liquid, and then the Osmo, which is a liquid, just raised the grain a lot, and the surface was just too coarse, whereas I found the wax actually fills in between the grain marks. Perfect for a desktop. So after a few hours of waxing on and waxing off, I felt like the Karate Kid, but broken. I installed a batten across the back wall as well, ready to hold down some of the weight of that countertop. This probably isn't necessary, but better safe than sorry. I even went to the effort of dyeing and then waxing the batten. I'm really into this project, no shortcuts here. So the next day the family came back, and with the wife on filming duties, we lifted it into place, and it fit like a glove, and I could not have been happier with the look of it. So there we go. This is what I've got so far. So far I've got a desktop, I've got somewhere to put my computer and my monitor, I've got drawers for storage, but I'm nowhere near finished. I want to fill the top half. I've got shelves, cupboards, lighting, TV, everything's planned. I just need to do it. If you want to join with me on that journey, stay tuned. The next video will be up soon. Take care. Bye-bye.